guys, this is Smithy. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is so very special. I am going to dupe the wipes of the newest Adept Cosmetics palette, and that is the EBE palette. I'm sure that you've already seen a lot of reviews already on YouTube. I was on a vacation when this palette was released and I really wanted to dupe the wipes from the already existing shades that I have in my collection. So I might not be like 100% exact, but I just want to fulfill the cravings that I have for that palette. So this is my dupe palette. You guys can decide if I am remotely close or if I'm far way apart. But I'm going to do live swatches, create this look for you guys using this dupe palette. But if you guys want to see all of it in action, then please keep on watching. Now this palette is already available on the Adept Cosmetics website and you can use my code SMITHYSONY to save you 10% off. I wanted to dupe this palette so bad because there are aspects of this palette that I personally already have these color stories in my collection, and I wanted to see if it is coming close to it, if I love the color story or not. That is how I decide whether do I really need the palette or not in my collection. So let's begin. I'm going to go row by row and see how it rolls. The first shade is EBE1, which is pretty much duped from, these are pretty much all Ensley Rain shadows except this one. This is an Adept shadow. Maybe this one also is an Adept shadow. I'll tell you exactly all the shade names. The first shade is from the Snow Moon palette from Ensley Rain, and the shade is called Winter Halo. So this is pretty much like a very smooth iridescent multichrome, I would say. I can see shifts of pink and gold, a little bit, yeah, pink and gold I would say, but it is like pretty much like a white shadow in the pan. So you can see that shift happening, very smooth, very dimensional. This is what I have in my inner corners. It's a beautiful shadow all across the eyelid too. And when I saw the swatches of EBE1, it pretty much looked like that green shift coming through. And I thought that this shadow would absolutely complement that palette very nicely. The second shade is called J-Rod, and this is also from the Snow Moon palette. And the shade is called Snow Angel. It's pretty much like a silvery shade, but I think in the Adept Cosmetics palette, it is pretty much like a holochrome shade. We have a lot of holochromy shades. I do have one from Ensley Rain itself. It's a single shadow, but any holochrome would do. But it's definitely more like silvery. If you want, I can press a holochrome on top of it. I'm sure that I do have something right here sitting. There you go. So now I have that holochrome particles too. And that is duping the shade J-Rod. Okay, the third shade in the palette is called EBE2, and this looks like a very deep dark shade with purple and green shifts to it. And I actually did take a shade from Minka palette, and this shade is called Anna. It is from the new Minka palette. It looks like a deep dark green shade with purple shifts running throughout it, and that's exactly how it looks in the pan too. So let me swatch it for you guys. Really beautiful, dimensional and shifty shade. There you go. And that is duping the shade EBE2. The next shade is called Trans Medium, and that looks like a very taupey shade, like a very light taupey shade. For me, it is more going to be like a transitional shade. And this is basically from, let me see. This is another Adept Cosmetics shade, and this is Tranquil Tone, and I think this one was from the Unity palette. So let me swatch it for you guys. There you go. And when I was actually thinking of whether I need this palette or not, I felt like this palette is like a sister palette to Unity palette, that it would complement really good with each other. Unity palette is definitely less special shades and more of like sparkly dimensional shades. And obviously EBE palette is like full of shifts and stuff here. Let's move on to the next shade, and the next shade is called EBOs, and this is actually from Underland palette from Ensley Rain Cosmetics. The shade is called Behead. There were a lot of shades from the Underland palette that I used for duping the shade, and this shade is pretty much a very deep dark rusty what do I say, like a rusty red I would say, but with green, so many dimensional shimmer particles. I see purple, I see green, I see gold, I see rusty tones. Very, very pretty. I love that shade all across the eyelid. That creates such a beautiful dimensional smoky eye. Really, really love the shifts also. And those were the first 5 shades from the Duping, the vibes of the EBE palette. Okay, let's move on to the next row. And the next shade is called the Roswell Grays, which is like a taupey, purpley gray shade. And this I actually duped from the Snow Moon palette again. Oh, there's a lot of shades from Snow Moon palette actually. And the shade is called Lunar Drift. So let's swatch that. Again, a very taupey, purpley shade. Really, really pretty. You know how much I love those kind of shades. Okay, let's move on to the next shade. The next shade is called Psionics. And Psionics, I felt like, I feel like I can find a lot of shades like that, like from the Wolf Moon palette. A lot of shades, even from Adept Cosmetics, I feel like it has like a pinkier base with a lot of dimensional particles. But I think I did take the Wolf Moon palette for this, and the shade is called Majestic Moon. Again, it's like a very spicy neutral shade with a lot of dimensional particles. A very smooth toppery shade, I would say. Okay, there you go. And that is duping the shade Psionics. You can see that shift in dimension that is coming through. Really, really pretty. Okay, let's move on to the next shade. The next shade is called Dementor's UIP. Dementor UIP. This is totally outside my comfort zone, okay? All the shade names. I'm definitely going to butcher the shade names. This is also from Underland palette. And the shade name is called Nonsense. And this is pretty much the deepest shade in the palette. It is not a burgundy, it's not an eggplant, it's somewhere in the middle. And I feel like this shade definitely captures the essence of the palettes very, very nicely. There you go. And that is the shade Duping Dementor's UIP. The next shade is called Zeta Reticuli. Oh my gosh. And that is a deep, beautiful, deep dark magenta shade with like a green shift happening throughout it. And I took this shade, and my shade definitely has some holochrome particles. I think this is from Harvest Moon, and the shade number 12. I don't have a shade name right now in front of me, but it is from the Harvest Moon palette, and you can see the most shifty shade in that palette. That's what this is. At my end, I see such a beautiful Jatak green shade, but in the pan, I see pink. Oh, you see pink too. You see that shift, right? Really, really pretty. Very beautiful. Okay. Let's move on to the last shade from that palette. And this is called Baghdad Phantom. And this is duped by the shade from the Cold Moon palette, and the shade is called Keon. This is a shade that you cannot miss if you do have that palette. It is that holochromy purpley shade with like that green base to it. Really, really beautiful. Again, a holochromy shade. So let me swatch it for you guys. This is one of my favorite shades from that palette. It was such a beautiful dimensional shade. I'm sure you can see all the shifts coming through. I'll come a little closer so that you can see the shiftiness and the dimension. Very, very pretty. I really, really love that shade. Okay, now let's move on to the last row. The last row, the first shade is called Skinny Bob, and this is very similar to the last shade, I would say, but this is more light and iridescent, but with a lilac base to it. Very, very pretty. Again, another holochrome. I see green, gold, pink with a lilac base. There you go. So that is duping the shade Skinny Bob. Very, very dimensional shade again. Did I say which palette is it from? Let me see. And this shade is also from the Underland palette, and the shade name is called Wicked Wildflowers. That Underland palette is one of my favorite palettes from Ensley Rain. It is such a unique palette. At the time when it was released, it was nothing. It was like, I didn't have any palette that resembled that, but now we have a lot of grungier tones in the other brands too, so you can definitely find more similar shades. The next shade is a matte, grungy, olivey green shade, and this comes also from Underland palette, and the shade is called Hallucination. So let me swatch that. It's more like a grungier, poopy green. There you go. And that is duping the shade Orion Reptilian. Let's move on to the next shade. The next shade is called Inner Divinity, and this looks like a very dimensional duochrome shade with a pink base to it, but I see a lot of green reflex running throughout it. So I took this shade, and I think this is from the Cold Moon palette. Let me confirm. This is from the Cold Moon palette and the shade number 5. So from the top row, 5, 5th shade. Let me swatch that. And there you go. Very beautiful, again a very spicy neutral shade, but I hope you can see that pink base from it. Really beautiful. Okay, let's move on to the last 2 shades. The first shade is this green matte shade, is called Green Men in the original palette, and this is duped by the Underland palette also, and this is the shade called Rabbit Hole. It's that deep green shade. So let me swatch that. Very beautiful grungy green matte shade. Again, a very necessary shade in this palette for sure. Okay, the last shade is called Remote Viewing, and this shade is like a green shimmer shade. I don't see many shifts running throughout it, and this is also duped from the Underland palette, and the shade is called Chaos. So let me swatch this for you. A very smooth shimmer. There you go. Okay, so that is all the shades, at least the vibes, being duped from the EBE palette from Adept Cosmetics. Now I'm gonna keep using this throughout this week and see how many times I'm reaching for it. I'm not gonna force myself to reach for it, but I am gonna put this palette in this format outside and see how many times I'm reaching for this palette, if it really does make sense for me to purchase this palette or not. But looking at the color story, I am really liking the color story. But again, you know, I'm not a person who wears a lot of holochromes in my everyday life, and I'm not a big green person. And when I saw this palette, those were the shades that were jumping out to me, and that's why I was thinking twice whether I do need this palette in my collection or not. So I hope that this helps for you guys. Let me give you a close-up of all the swatches for you so that you can see all the shifts, the dimension, the crazy beautiful shades that were encapsulated in this palette. Very, very pretty. I'm never doubting the quality of Adept Cosmetics shadows, but again, I cannot deny the point that this palette retails for $79. So even after I put my code Smithy Sony, I'm only taking 10% off, and then shipping charges, taxes, everything would bump up the price definitely over $80. So I'm keeping that in mind whenever I'm purchasing a new palette, especially if I do have these shades in the collection. But I hope that this helps. Now let's move on to the eye look that I created using this palette. Okay, let's create a look inspired by the Adept Cosmetics EBE palette. Now you saw me talk about the version that I created. I would say most of the shades would be similar is what I'm hoping. But let's create a look because the test stands there, right? I'm going to start off with this shade, Scorpion, sorry, I'm not going to say the name. This deeper shade in the outer corner. I'm going to just pack it right there because I've already done my face makeup. Actually, I also have eyeliner and mascara on, so just excuse that, but let's do and finish the makeup. So I'm just placing that shadow for all the depth that I want, and I'm just placing it right there in the outer corner. I'm tapping so that it blends by itself, at least on the edges, keeping the depth where I need it. Okay, now I'm going to start off with that green shade, that grungy green, and I'm going to place that in the inner portion of the crease, just right there. It's more like a pukey green shade, olive leaning. So I'm just gonna place it right there in the inner part. So that's gonna be our background crease shade. Okay, so pretty. Also going to do the same thing on my lower lash line, just on the inner portion of the lower lash line, I would say. I'm going to take a little bit of this taupey gray shade here, and I'm going to take that as the blending shade between that green and that deeper shade that we applied first, just so that everything is seamless, and taking that same shade on the outer corner of the lower lash line, just right there. Okay, so now with that we have all the mattes placed. Now let's move on to the shimmers. Okay, so the first shade that I want to apply is this shade. This seems so beautiful and dimensional, so I'm going to take that in the outer portion of the eyelid. And don't worry, if we lose the depth, we can definitely intensify that. And this has that beautiful green shift to it. It has a lot of multi-dimensional sparkles running throughout it. Dipping back into that deeper shade, the first shade that we applied, and just tapping the edges, just right there. Okay, now for the lid shade, I am going to take, let's take this green first, and I'm just taking a tad bit of it in the inner portion, mainly as like a base. Obviously my hands are itching to use as many shades as I can, that's why I'm dipping into so many shades. But there's so many beautiful shifts and shades that are happening in this palette. And now I'm going to take a loose fluffy brush, and let's take this shade, the first shade, super sparkly, and I'm going to just take that in the inner corner, but also in the swoop. This shade definitely has a lot of shifts in it. Like I see pink, gold, really pretty. Okay, and then just to have the sparkle and the shine, I'm going to dip into this shade, and I'm just tapping it right on top, just to get all the glimmer and the shimmer, just right there. Okay, you'll love it. Just melting everything out. Now let me finish off this eye with some liner and mascara, and there you go, that's my final look. I really love the way how this turned out. I absolutely love the dimension of the shimmers and the mattes also. They're grungy, they're deep, they go along so beautifully. I really love the color story of this palette. Cannot wait to create more with this palette and see if I really need it in my collection or not. But that's all. Once you've seen the look also with it, you guys have to let me know, have you already purchased this Ebe palette from Adept Cosmetics or not? Or are you planning to dupe the vibes the same way that I did? I'm trying to save money for all the fall and the holiday releases coming up. So hopefully if there is not enough palettes that appeal to me, I can get this if I use it even more for like a sale price. That's what I'm looking for. But that's all for today. If you did like my video, you know what to do. Do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell so that you're notified every time that I post things. I generally upload 3 videos every single week, every Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.